last years of the 19th century, that human affairs were being watched from the timeless worlds of space. No one could have dreamed we were being scrutinized as someone with a microscope studies creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. Few men even considered the possibility of life on other planets. And yet, across the gulf of space, minds immeasurably superior to ours regarded this Earth with envious eyes. And slowly and surely, they drew their plans against us.
Broadcasting live
from a tiny studio somewhere in North America.
This is Dark Matters Radio Live. And now I give you your host,
the silverback of ufology.
Here's Don Ecker.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another Dark Matters Radio. Dark Matters Radio is brought to you courtesy of KGRA Radio, and this is the place where we, at least try to examine those dark and dusty corners. This weekend will be our last live show for a couple of weeks. Of course, next weekend is Easter, and Good Friday is a anniversary of sorts for me. April the 2nd, 1972, where I met my personal Waterloo in I Corps in northern South Vietnam all those many years ago. Every year, I've got to celebrate it. Well, not celebrate it. I certainly remember it. This year, I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do, but I can tell you this. In the next couple of weeks, my wife and I are going to be absolutely pulling our hair out by the roots. We are about to go through a kitchen remodel process. And that means we're not going to have a kitchen, period, for 3 weeks at least. We've got to unload everything out of there. Got to unhook the stove, unhook the dishwasher. I mean, it's going to be a bloody nightmare. But that's all in a couple of weeks. So who knows where that's going to head. Here in sunny Southern California, I got to tell you, it's been rather coolish, but they promised us a beautiful weekend in the 80s, so they say. I am looking forward to it. And with that being said, I guess we're going to jump into tonight's show. Now, my guest tonight is a gentleman that I have known for many, many, many years. We go all the way back to the very early 90s when I first heard from him when he called me up at UFO Magazine. This is a guy that I have had tremendous admiration for because he has gone where few in his profession have dared to travel. And of course, I am talking about my guest tonight, Mr. Billy Cox, journalist. He's been with the Sarasota Herald Tribune, and for many years, he has run a blog, courageously I might add, examining and talking to some of the highest placed people in the annals of officialdom. And I've interviewed Billy a couple of times in the past. Every time it's been an arm-twisting thing because I'd call him up and say, Billy, it's about time for you to come on my show. Oh, Don, I don't have much to say. But this week I was able to nab him. And, Billy, it is a distinct pleasure to have you on. How are you doing, my friend?
Well, I'm doing okay. Thanks for asking. Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned the 49th anniversary of your the spring offensive in Vietnam with the NVA coming over the DMZ. And I have wondered this question. Is there a correlation between your time in the military service and Vietnam and your interest in UFOs?
Well, now, it's funny, Billy, and ladies and gentlemen, this was not pre-planned. He kind of caught me flat-footed. There is a possibility of that, although I honestly, Billy, I've never really thought about it like that. Before this whole Easter offensive in 1972 began, the work that I was involved in, and I've got to be careful what I say because a lot of it was very highly classified, but we were conducting intelligence operations directed at the North Vietnamese, the communists, and there were stories. Let me see if I can phrase this so I don't get my ass in a jam. There were stories coming down about mysterious helicopters that were, well, they looked like Hueys, okay, but they were not being flown by Americans. Now, at the time, it was believed in certain quarters that perhaps the North Vietnamese were able to salvage a lot of helicopters that had gone down. I mean, hey, there were a ton of helicopters that were shot down in that conflict, and they might have patched some together. And then there were some rumors that Caucasians were seen on these unknown flights. Now, at the time, there were people that thought they might be Soviet Spetsnaz troops, Russians, special forces, conducting operations of some kind. And the other possibility were that they were communist East Germans. But there were some UFO stories that came out of Vietnam. But I got to tell you, Billy, I was never personally involved in anything like that.
Well, I just wondered about that because I do know that some reports of UFOs or helicopters, they're almost interchangeable. Did you actually see any, what you could say were actually unknown helicopters while you were over there?
No.
Okay.
No, I could never say that.
So we fast forward all these years, and I have always been curious, Don, if there was something about your experience in Vietnam that related to your interest in UFOs. Could be totally disconnected. It's just a curiosity of mine.
I can't think, Billy, of anything that I could put a firm connection on. Now, hey, that's not to say that there weren't some very weird things that happened. And later, I made myself familiar with a number of storied events that supposedly happened. But I got to be honest, too, that, you know, I have as I'm sure you are aware, I have a somewhat skeptical nature. And things that I would like to believe are not necessarily real things, if you know what I mean. I mean, I would like to believe that if I met Jerry Ryan, she would be attracted to me. And I might think about that all night long, but that doesn't make it so. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, Don, you know, I mean, you were the only game in town for the longest time. And when did you start UFO Magazine? What year was that?
I didn't. My wife did.
Vicky, what year
right.
did Vicky?
And her then partner Sherry Stark. That was in 1986. I came on board in 88.
I remember it was difficult to find. I never got a subscription. I always liked the idea of going to a newsstand back when those things existed, and being surprised if I could find it there. And I always used to look so forward to reading this magazine because the board that you covered was vast. I mean, everything from Mars to Terence McKenna. I mean, the entire mosaic of this phenomenon. You didn't shy away from any of it, and you would call bullshit on things that certainly didn't add up. And I guess here we are now, where things are breaking almost every other day, and even back then, though, things were happening. It's just they didn't get the coverage that they're getting today. Certainly, the Fourth Estate wasn't on board. It's not like they are today. And I was just wondering what made you cross the line to become a bona fide investigator and to some extent an activist for transparency.
Well, okay. I guess it would have to be a couple of things. Now, number one, in 1966, I was a high school kid, and I came from a part of the country that hunted, a lot. The area I came from, I mean, every year when deer season began, that was kind of and that was usually the first or second week in December. That was kind of like Christmas, New Year's, and Halloween all wrapped up together. In those days, even my high school, and it was a big school, we had a total of, not all in my class, of course, but we had a total of about 3,300 students. So that was a fair-sized school.
Yeah.
They would give the first day of deer season off. Now, can you imagine that today?
No.
No. And so anyway, in 66, I was with several buddies, and, it was like the thing to do. We were deer hunting in Pennsylvania, up around, in that part of the world, a very famous landmark called the Horseshoe Curve, all right, which was an engineering marvel back in the mid-19th century. It was a railroad, the Pennsylvania Railroad, although I don't think it was called the PRR then. But this was around a horseshoe-shaped mountain that literally allowed trains to go from the East Coast out towards Chicago and eventually out to the West Coast. And as a side note, in World War II, if the Nazis, the Germans, would have had the capability to get bombers over here, that was, according to what I've heard ever since I was a kid, that was one of the prime targets that the Germans would have targeted. So, we were hunting up there, and it was in the afternoon. Of course, it was wintertime. We were coming down off the mountain about 4:15 or so. It was starting to get dark when suddenly we were there were four of us. We were overflown by four brilliant white lights. And Billy, I had to have told this story to you before.
If you have, I've forgotten it. Keep going.
Okay. So, well, anyway, we were walking down the hill, and suddenly one of my buddies started yelling, and I thought the dummy had, sighted a deer or something, and he was going to scare it away. And I whipped around, looked, and he was looking up in the sky, and by then all four of us were. And here were these four brilliant arc light-like objects flying in a diamond formation. And they were going at a real leisurely pace, maybe, I'm guessing, no more than not even 200 miles an hour. And as they overflew us, suddenly the light in the rear, okay, and they were headed, let me think now, that would have been west. They were heading in I think a southeast heading. And the light in the rear suddenly shot straight up into the sky. I mean, it was like a missile taking off. And when that happened, suddenly the three remaining lights that are now in a V formation suddenly hit a burst of speed, and they were out of sight in seconds. So, you had 4 high school guys standing there on this damn snowy, slope coming down from deer hunting all day with our jaws around our knees. Now, that was my first sighting of something really, really weird. And that never left me. And I know I've told this story a number of times over the years, but oh yeah, that was amazing. And when we got home, I told my father and mother about it, and they listened to me, and I don't recall them saying much. And I was positive that this would be on the news or on the radio, and it was total silence. Now, it was years later when I really got involved and I was doing some historical research that I discovered that at that period of time, these damn things were being seen everywhere, okay, in that part of the U.S., Pennsylvania, New Jersey, West Virginia. And recall, this was right around the time of John Keel's investigation of the Mothman down in West Virginia, which incidentally were probably not even 3 hours driving from where I lived. Ohio, all these states were being flown over. It seemed like there was a hell of a flap going on. Well, that was the first thing. And then in 68, 69, I was going to college, and I was going to a state teachers college over near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I would drive over there. I would come down from my hometown, get onto the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and turn west and drive for an hour and a half or something like that, and get to my school. Now, right before I would get off the turnpike to go to school, there was a Howard Johnson's restaurant there. And these guys had some of the best homemade cinnamon rolls I ever had anywhere. And I would always stop there and get a cup of coffee and a cinnamon roll when I was home and driving back. And I would leave home around 5:30, 6 o'clock Sunday evening. And, the whole thing, not counting stopping for the coffee and cinnamon roll, would take me about 2 hours to get to school. And I left this Sunday, and Billy, I hopped on the turnpike, and I started driving, and I had left around 6. It wouldn't have been much later than 6. And when I got to the Howard Johnson's restaurant, I pulled into the parking lot, got out, went into the restaurant. Now, they had a double set of doors. You would go into like a foyer through one set of doors, and then another set of doors would take you into the restaurant. And there was a big clock right above the second set of doors. And as I'm walking in there, and I look up at the clock to see what time it is, it was 10 o'clock. And I had left at 6, around 6. And from that date until now, I have never been able to explain those 2 hours of missing time. Now, this sounds like, oh, listen to Ecker, he's telling a story. No, that actually happened. And as a matter of fact, I even talked to Bud Hopkins about it way back in the day. And, well, take that for whatever it's worth. But I think that all had something to do with my fascination.
Okay, so missing time. This was 1969. 1968.
Right before 60. Right before 69, because 69 is when I went into the Army.
And certainly at that moment in history, the missing Tom stuff was not part of our sort of subcultural references.
No, but the Condon report was in the process of coming out. And I had been following that. Now, I was not, by any stretch, I was not actively involved in anything. But when I heard that report was coming out, and when the book was released, I bought a copy. And it was a big, thick thing. And I started reading through it. And, even then, I think I knew the fix was in. Because later, some of those guys involved in that program even came out and said, well, don't believe Condon. I mean, my God, 30% of the reports that we received, we were never able to explain. And the way it was presented was typical, government, Air Force. Oh, there's nothing to see here, move along. And I knew then that there was something rotten in Denmark, Billy.
So then after your hunting episode in 1966, is it kind of safe to say that's when your interest in UFOs began to peak and you started reading a lot of stuff? Whatever.
Well, when I got back from the Army, okay, now I had been in military hospitals after I got hurt for about not quite 6 months. And when I got home, I used to haunt bookstores because let me tell you, I just love to read. And I had bought a copy of Fate magazine down there. And I think this all, psychologically had something to do with it. But, this had to be about 74, I think, somewhere around 74, 75. And I'm reading through this magazine, and they had all kinds of odd stories in there. And then I saw a blurb about John Keel had a new book coming out. And there was a little bit in there about what the book was. It was called The Mothman Prophecies. And I read this, and I can't describe the feeling that came over me. And because I had remembered back in, when was the Mothman case? I think that was 66, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was in the 60s. I don't remember the exact date.
Yeah, I think it was 66. And I'll never forget when, and even our local TV station did a news story on it. And this was before the collapse of the Silver Bridge. Sure. And the newscaster was kind of joking about it because if you recall, or if you were around then, there was a campy television show on, which basically featured Batman and the boy wonder Robin, okay?
Sure.
And they had all these, comic, of course, it wasn't like the more recent films where they got serious, but the Joker and the Penguin and all these guys, well,
Riddler.
Yeah, the Riddler. And the bottom line was, they started saying, and now we've got a new one called the Mothman. And everybody giggled, But when I met Keel and later got to know Keel, and we had some long conversations about that, well, I gotta tell you, there were a lot of things that happened in that case that were not funny. Okay. So let me put the shoe on the other foot, buddy, because I was going to ask you what in the world, because I wanted to get into some of your reporting and your blog. I wanted to ask you, Billy, what was it that caused your wrinkled brow about this? And you've got a little under 2 minutes before we got to go to break. So you can set it up, and when we come back, then I'll bore in.
Well, okay, without getting into details before the break, I'll just say I think there is a very high element of the absurd in this whole UFO thing. I do think a lot of the trickster theory applies. That there is some manipulation going on, far above my pay grade, certainly. But it had to do with a sighting that I had in 1979 in Cocoa Beach, just south of Kennedy Space Center. And when I saw this thing, and fortunately there were two other witnesses as well, when I saw this audacious apparition just south of where they're sending people to the moon and spaceships to the surface of Mars and beyond, I thought, you've got to be kidding me.
What was it you saw?
Oh, well, I guess you would call it a triangle. It takes a bit of exposition, so you want to wait for the break, or
yeah, let's do that, because I'm just seconds away from that. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, because I was able to give him a little arm twisting, because I love to have him on the show and I love to talk to him, Mr. Billy Cox, who is a reporter extraordinaire in my book. He has done yeoman service over the years, and he's been fearless in pointing a light where few other journalists have ever dared to tread. We're going to take a break now, and after these words, we're going to come back and we're going to do some more chattering. So stick around, because it's going to get good.
Hi, folks. It's troubling times, and fear is pushing emotions, which in turn pushes health the wrong direction. Do you ever get an ache because life is uneasy? Try Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. Life Change Tea works on your digestive tract, helping to move food through quicker and comfortably so your health is spot on. Life Change Tea may not help with world issues, but it will help with your digestive issues. A glass a day helps keep the intruders away. So, change your life today. Log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. If your health game is off, get on by ordering Life Change Tea. Getthetea.com. And while you're on our site, look around at the great non-GMO organic supplements. And if you're a sales shopper, go to our specials page and see what's for you. I've been drinking the tea for 12 years, and I'm sure glad for its health benefits. Again, that's getthetea.com. Getthetea.com. The tea that makes you go.
When you're in the house for longer periods of time, you can see them flying or running across the floor. Ooh, yuck. They're unhealthy, gross, and disgusting. Bugs. I loathe bugs. We keep a clean home, but occasionally bugs show up. Well, I found something that is tougher than bugs. Orange Guard. On contact, it kills hidden bugs, including ants, roaches, and fleas. Plus, Orange Guard is a residual repellent. All of the ingredients of Orange Guard are on the FDA generally recognized as safe list. Orange Guard may be used around food, humans, and pets. It comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Orange Guard. Available at orangeguard.com, Whole Foods, and Ace Hardware.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The on-air live button, so just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
We are the contact for alternative research topics. The Planet, KGRAradio.com.
And we are back with my guest, Mr. Billy Cox. Billy, you were talking about this triangular thing you saw. Would you please continue on?
Okay, but first, you heap some accolades on me that I appreciate, but I will just say that right now, where we are in this whole phenomenon is just so amazing with the amount of really, really good, terrific, deep-sourced reporting that's going on now. I feel like I was back in the 1970s when I first started out in journalism. I was a sports writer. I started in preps and then went up to colleges and then the pros. And working in a little newspaper, you don't have a whole lot of staffing. You go to the Super Bowl, or rather I should say the Orange Bowl or the Gator Bowl, and you're outnumbered by the Miami Herald or the Fort Lauderdale News, the Sun-Sentinel, the Orlando Sentinel. And after a while, it was such a crowded field, I felt really insecure, because I hated waking up on Sunday morning after a college game and reading my stuff and comparing it to everybody else, because it was just so, they double and tripled and quadrupled staffed it. I knew that I couldn't compete with any of that stuff, and it made me really insecure. And it was one of the reasons that I got out of sports writing, because it was packed journalism, and I knew that there's just too many good reporters out there. And honestly, this is how I feel now with the sort of reporting that's coming out. We're having a sea change now, and I never thought, I always thought UFOs were going to be a journalism desert. And now the type of stuff that's coming out is just terrific. So I just want to say, I feel like there's so much good stuff right now. I don't know that I have, a whole lot of stuff to contribute to this. We can get into that later if you want. But here we are in the spring of 1979, and it's the 3 Mile Island time. I do remember that. It's after midnight. I was working sports then, so I was kind of a night owl. And we're at the beach. We're in Cocoa Beach. The reason we're there after midnight is because there's some offshore heat lightning, which was spectacular. It was just putting on this strobe light show. And the clouds were off to the east, out over the Atlantic. It was a moonless night, as I recall. There was a thin layer of high clouds. You could see the stars, but they weren't especially dazzling because it was sort of a gossamer veil of clouds, very thin.
Well, I was going to say, it's always a little hazy there, isn't it?
Yeah, you've got the light pollution going on. Cocoa Beach was not as big as it is today back then, but still, you have to contend with a little bit of light pollution too. So we're walking along the beach, me and a buddy from high school and my girlfriend at the time, Terry. We're walking north. So we can see the gantries. You can see the lighthouse of the Cape, which is jutting out into the Atlantic. And it's kind of quiet. You can hear the hiss of the small waves lapping up against the shore. And off to my right, we hadn't been walking for long, but I just noticed something. So we're walking north, and off to my right, to the east, something begins to move in the sky. It's like it's been sitting there watching. Again, this is all just impressions. I can't prove any of this stuff. But just the feeling that I got, it had mass, because you could tell you couldn't see the stars behind it, so it was a solid object, and it began to move. the only really distinctive characteristics were 3 red non-oscillating lights, triangular arrayed, 1 in front and 2 in the back. And there was also the sound, kind of a hum, like a tuning fork hitting a glass, that kind of thing. And it seemed to detach itself from that part of the sky, and it began moving very silently, I would say almost oozing like a liquid. It felt almost organic. It began moving north. And as I'm watching this, and I would say it was about maybe a 45-degree angle. This thing was either really big or it was really close, hard to tell. And I grabbed Terry's arm, and I swung around, and I pointed up, and I said, "Look." And my buddy Steve was leading the way, and we just stood there and watched as this thing continued to cruise north at a pretty good clip, I guess.
Did you feel anxiety or fear?
Wonder and awe. I didn't feel threatened by this thing, but I suppose because it was so big and so unexpected, I was certainly intimidated by that, and yet I couldn't take my eyes off it, obviously. It was like a magnet that was drawing Steve. Steve went running north, trying to keep pace with this thing, and I started following Steve. I'm running too. My girlfriend grabs my arm, and she goes, "No." And
what's the matter with you, fool?
I know, right, exactly. And so I'm shaking her off, and she's holding on to me. Steve is booking. I'm booking after Steve, and Terry's running after me. And I would say the duration of this entire event couldn't have been any more than 10 seconds. And then at the end of the thing, it seemed to just like tilt, like it tilted, and then it was gone, like it had evaporated. And we just sat there, or stood there rather, looking at each other like, WTF was that?
Well, I could tell you my attitude would have been, I think it's beer o'clock.
Yeah. I don't know what we did after that, but, again, it's one of those things of inverse proportions. The farther away you get from an event, sometimes the bigger it gets in the rearview mirror. That's how this thing worked on me. It occupied more space in my head the farther away I got from it. So it put the hook in me, and then, that's when I started looking around, going to the, what was it, Books A Million back then, maybe, or some bookstores that don't exist anymore, Walden Books, maybe that was it. And I would go into the to the occult section. I'm looking around over my shoulder like I'm going to, the porn video section of Blockbuster, making sure there's nobody that I know, seeing me stalking the occult section of the Walden Books, and I'm looking for things that might sort of enlighten me a little bit more, because I was coming into this thing cold. And I did my first UFO story in 1980. If you come into Cape Canaveral from the north on A1A, coming from Orlando, one of the first things that you would see at the city limit sign is one of those Apollo 8 or one of those Earthrise photos. You see the moon in the foreground, and you see the Earth in the background. And the sign was, "In the beginning, God, ... And that was placed there by a radio evangelist. Oh, God, what was his name? Carl. I'll think of it as soon as we hang up. Anyway, he had a village, a mock Vietnam. I'm not making this up. Part of it was Solomon's Temple. Carl McIntyre, that was his name, Carl McIntyre. He had on the right or west-hand side of A1A, just to the south of that sign, a combination Solomon's Temple / Vietnamese village. He was very much a supporter of the war in Vietnam. And it was kind of an oddity there. It's not something that you would expect at the gateway to the stars, so to speak. But every year, usually in the spring, he would have a UFO conference. Do you remember the name Robert Barry, Bob Barry?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, he had a radio show back in Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
I think.
yeah.
Okay,
I knew him. I knew him a little bit.
Well, so I'm going into this thing blind. I really don't know the first thing. This is just, I would say about a year after this encounter of whatever sighting that I had in Cocoa Beach. So I'm curious. My features editor says, "Hey, Billy, go check this crazy stuff out." I was, okay, sure, why not? I'm curious anyway, but now I can hide behind journalistic obligation. It's not me, you see. It's my boss who wants this story, right? So I could hide behind that. And, there was the face on Mars, the Viking photos from Cydonia, that was prominently featured. There was mention of Roswell, and this was 1980, I guess it was.
Right. Well, that's the same time that Bill Moore and Charlie Berlitz's book, The Roswell Incident, was released.
Absolutely. So I go in there and I talk to some of these folks, and Bob Barry, is very, his certitude was convincing for a lot of folks. Me, I'm on the fence. Okay, I saw something weird. I don't know what it is. But he seemed a lot more certain of what it probably was than I was. I didn't know. I mean, it's just a mystery to me, but he's talking about, aliens and all this kind of stuff. That's when I met Jim Oberg.
Okay.
On the phone. So
buddy Jim.
Your old buddy Jim. Yeah, you guys used to go out for beers all the time, didn't you, Don?
Yeah, right after Larry King Live.
That was a good one. You'll have to tell your listeners about that one if they don't remember it. But anyway, so I call Oberg. I had read where he had done won some kind of a prize, $1,000 prize from Cutty Sark. I think it was he disproved supposedly the reality of UFOs in some essay or something. And I knew he worked at Johnson Space Center. And he says, Bob Barry, he says, and the old gray head syndrome, right? I said, what do you mean? He said, so there were a bunch of retirees there, right, looking for the angels to take them off to heaven. I said, well, something, Jim, come to think of it, yeah, most of these people were elderly. He said, yeah, he's just another snake oil peddler, blah, blah, blah. And so I quoted Oberg along with Bob Barry. And boy, man, I heard from Barry. He says, I can't believe that you quoted that debunker. Don't you understand what a debunker is, Billy? I didn't know what a debunker was. I'm still in my 20s. I don't know anything. And anyway, he read me the Riot Act. But what was interesting, back in those days, newspapers had illustrators, people who could conceptualize a story by, drawing. You didn't necessarily need photos. And it was, Susan, the artist, had taken my story and had multiple visual elements she extracted from it. One of them was little green men, little green men on ice, like we've covered the bodies. Well, a day or two after I got that, I did this story, and it appeared. I got a phone call from a guy across the river at Patrick Air Force Base. And he says, is that true? I said, what do you mean? He said, that story you wrote today about the alien bodies. He says, is that true? And I said, yeah, I don't know. I have no way of proving. I'm just put in there what this guy Bob Barry said. I said, why do you ask? He says, well, I'm stationed over here at Patrick Air Force Base, and this is what we were told in cadet training. He says, I remember being in Okinawa, and we were told, yeah, you can't mention this, but that we definitely had recovered these bodies. And he said, I didn't think it was cool to talk about until I see your article. And he says, I just want to know if it was true. I said, look, what is your name? Let's get together. Oh, no. I don't know if it's okay to talk about this or not. So anyway, that kind of stuff really kind of nudged me forward a bit more. That's probably more than you want to know, but that's how I got, that was back in 1980. So that's how long I've been on this sojourn.
Well, I'll tell you, Billy, over the years, I've kept up when you were doing your blog. And incidentally, ladies and gentlemen, Billy's blog has since been shut down. I wanted you, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, as you told me when we spoke last, you never had the chance to talk to your readership about what was happening. One week it was there, and then it was gone. So do you want to take this opportunity before we go any further to talk about that or explain it, or however you want to cover it?
Okay. Well, I worked for 30 years over on the Space Coast, which was the Today newspaper, and then they changed it to Florida Today. And one of the things that kept me over there was just being around the Space Center. That was not one of my beats. Well, in fact, I didn't really have a beat, but I loved being over there, watching rockets and space shuttles going up, and actually going into the clean rooms and being dwarfed by the proportions of something you'd never see again in your life, such as the Mars Observer, which ultimately got lost in space. I love being around the space program.
Well, before you go any further, that is something you and I have got to address before the show is over. The Mars Observer.
Oh, okay. All right. We can talk about that now if you want to.
Well, no, I want you to, I promised you the opportunity if you came on the show to address your readership. So.
Oh, okay. Well, so, yeah, I came over to Sarasota, Florida, where I work now, to get away from Gannett. Gannett owned the Florida Today, and I would say that Gannett really set the standards for profit margins on Wall Street for newspapers. Nobody had ever turned around newspapers for that kind of money like Gannett did. And it was set some aspirational goals for a lot of other newspapers, too. And you can sort of infer what that means in terms of quality, the kind of work you can produce. Anyway, so after 30 years, I had enough, and so I come to Sarasota, which is a New York Times property. They didn't have people that were, I wouldn't say any better than the ones I left at Florida Today, but it was a different culture. You could take months working on a story, whereas the Gannett property I'd left, you had to do a story a day. I mean, you're just making sausage. And so I thought I'd died and gone to heaven when I got over here. But one of the things that I asked when I got over here and was interviewing, actually, was I said to everyone that I talked to, from the executive editor down to my assistant features editor, I said, I'm interested in UFOs. I'm interested in writing about this stuff. What would you think about that? And they'd kind of look at me and smile, arched eyebrow, and say, well, if you can find a local angle, that's fine with us. So I thought I died and gone to heaven. And so in 2007, I started writing this Devoid blog. And much of it I did in my spare time, although they let me take company time to write this, because rarely would I find a local angle. Anyway, so we were owned by the Times until about 10 years ago. They sold us to something called Halifax, and then Halifax sold us to something called Gatehouse. And then a year and a half or so ago, Gatehouse and Gannett merged, so that Gannett is calling the editorial shots. And at that point, I went, well, this is bad news. I don't think I'm going to be here that much longer, because the demands were a bit different. I honestly think that I had the best job in the newspaper, which was pretty much allowing me to write features about things that I thought other people would be interested in. And so the writing was on the wall, though. It was probably a couple of months ago when one of my editors saying, Billy, you might want to start trying to migrate your blog to your entries to a safe platform because they're going to shut it down. I said, what? Why do they even care? And he said, well, they're doing some house cleaning, and they want to get rid of all blogs and posts that are not producing the sorts of numbers that they would like. And I thought, well, I mean, it's not costing them anything. Any hits that they get off of that is going to be gravy. I mean, what? But at any rate, yeah. So it was a management shakeup, and a new guy said, Billy, you know, this is on a Friday afternoon. Billy, have you started moving your stuff away? Because it's going to happen, like, pronto. And I said, well, this is Friday afternoon. I said, Brian, can you hold them off until Monday so I can at least write a farewell blog and let people know what's going on? Yeah, I think I can. And then so I got on the blog and starting to write, or at least I tried to, and the link had already been disabled. So I didn't even get a chance to do that. I mean, it was pretty bloodless, actually. And of course, I think the irony here is that, you know, this happens at a time when media attitudes towards this, what I call the great taboo, it's a radical transformation. As you know, Don, you know, and I would have thought, or rather I would have hoped that Gannett, which is the biggest newspaper chain in America, might have been just a little bit curious about this phenomenon that is breaking in other
bean counters, my friend, bean counters.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. And I was asking the editor, I said, now what exactly do they object to about my blog? And they said, well, it's readability, SEO, search engine optimization, readability. Your stuff is not really readable, according to the SEO stuff. And, you know, of course, I went on the SEO, I was looking at their critiques. They critiqued some kind of AI or something like that does it, and, you know, they said, well, you use too many words. You know, the maximum ideal length of a sentence is 20, 25 words, and yet 37.9% of your sentences have more than that. You need to write shorter sentences. I'm not making this up, man. No, I'm not. And so based on
I
that,
believe you, Billy.
Yeah. So anyway, that was the end of that. And, you know, I would say it's a real, I would take it as a real slap in the face if I actually respected the people who were doing it, their judgment. In fact, there was no judgment. It was AI. That was doing this, that was doing the metrics. So I guess you could say that I lost to an algorithm or something. But anyway, I mean, you know, I'm not especially bitter about it because, like I said earlier, this field has got so many good journalists.
Well, I gotta tell you, Billy, I gotta tell you this. I miss Devoid. I do. And to give you an idea of how valuable I found that as a resource, a couple of years ago, a story broke that involved Eric Davis, late of the NIDS outfit run by Bigelow, and Thomas Wilson, admiral who was in charge of the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, in the 90s, the latter 90s. And the story concerned notes that Davis took in a purported clandestine meeting he held with Thomas Wilson. Wilson agreed to see him at a EG&G, I believe it was, parking lot in Las Vegas. And this involved the fact that Wilson, after years and years of people trying to get information, asking him about the great taboo, UFOs, and all of this business, decided to do a little research. Now, along in that mix was Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man, American human being, male, that walked on the moon, came back from the moon with, many say, a whole different perspective on life as we know it. And along with other things, he began the Noetic, I believe it was the Noetic Institute, was openly available to talk about his belief that UFOs were not only real, he believed they were here. And to make a long story short, these notes ended up in his personal papers that were discovered after he died. Now, as you know, Billy, I was a criminal investigator. And when I get my teeth into something, I hang on for dear life until I can, at least in my own mind, work it out. And I started doing some research. And I wrote a paper. I believe I sent that to you, didn't I?
It's been a long time, Don.
Well, I did. And basically,
you're talking about years ago, right?
A couple of years ago. Just a couple.
Okay, yeah. Keep going, sorry.
Yeah, so anyway, I ended up calling you up to ask you about it. You had interviewed Wilson at one point in the 90s. You had certainly interviewed Edgar Mitchell. Mitchell talked about an admiral he had talked to, which ended up being Wilson. And in these notes that I am convinced Eric Davis recorded, because believe me, over the years, I've interviewed a ton of people. And what is the best way to make sure you got all the things that were said in one neat, tidy pile? You record it. And this interview that Davis purportedly did with Wilson was a bit over an hour, and the notes were too detailed. You know, I can put 1 and 1 together and come up with 2, and I can put 2 and 2 together and come up with 4, not 6, 8, or 9, all right? And I knew the only way he could have done this, and they were detailed notes, was to record it and then type them up later. Well, the bottom line was Wilson claimed that he started making a fuss and was pointed to an aerospace company out here on the West Coast, and he called them up, and basically the indication was they had hands on recovered technology. Now, if that's true, well, you know what? I'm going to have to pick it up there when we come back, because I got on a roll, Billy, and I looked at the clock, and holy moly, we are at the top of the hour break. So, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, my guest, Mr. Billy Cox, in my opinion, reporter extraordinaire, and we'll be back with Dark Matters Radio after these words and the top of the hour. Stick around.
A birthday without her mom, an anniversary without her husband, Her wedding day without her dad. These are the days when military families feel it most of all. The loss of their soldier, their sailor, their airman, their Marine, their Coast Guardsman. Families never forget their loved ones lost to war or illness or suicide. Families never forget, and neither do we. We are TAPS, the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. We provide resources, support, and comfort to heal the hearts and meet the needs of grieving military families, all at no cost to them. Your generosity can make an enormous difference in the lives of the families of our fallen military heroes. Our military families need to know they are not alone and they are not forgotten. Show them your support at TAPS.org.
When you're in the house for longer periods of time, you can see them flying or running across the floor. Ooh, yuck. They're unhealthy, gross, and disgusting. Bugs. I loathe bugs. We keep a clean home, but occasionally bugs show up. Well, I found something that is tougher than bugs. Orange Guard. On contact, it kills hidden bugs, including ants, roaches, and fleas. Plus, Orange Guard is a residual repellent. All of the ingredients of Orange Guard are on the FDA generally recognized as safe list. Orange Guard may be used around food, humans, and pets. It comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Orange Guard. Available at orangeguard.com, Whole Foods, and Ace Hardware.
This is Bill Skywatcher, producer for the KGRA Digital Broadcast Station. For a limited time only, save over 30% for life with full access to all content, and the offer expires March 31st, 2021. The current price is $3.99. It's going to go up, folks. So lock in that $3.99 price for life. You'll have till March 31st, 2021 to do it. So go to kgradb.com and make sure to subscribe now before the offer ends, March 31st, 2021. Hope you enjoy the website, everybody, and you all enjoy kgradb.com.
Now you have the inside contact for alternative talk radio. The Planet. KGRAradio.com.
And we are back with my guest, Mr. Billy Cox. We were having a lively conversation off the air. But anyway, let us get back to what I was talking about with the Eric Davis and Thomas Wilson story. So, I'm looking at these notes that purportedly were taken by Eric Davis. And according to what his notes said, when he's talking to Wilson, because many people, including Edgar Mitchell, had approached Wilson about what in the heck do they know in the Pentagon about UFOs. Well, according to these notes, and I'm not saying according to Thomas Wilson, because I'm going to tell you why he was forced, even if he wanted to tell the truth, to deny it, okay? I'm going to tell you why he adamantly to this day refuses to acknowledge any of this. And Eric Davis has gone underground. He's not available for comment. And I have also my own ideas about why that is. I talked to several scientific type people, one a physicist that knows Davis, and he gave me great insight into Davis, but that's fodder for another day. So at any rate, Thomas Wilson made some racket at the Pentagon. Somebody along the line is alleged to have pointed him to an aerospace company out here on the West Coast. I have my own idea on what that company is. I can't prove it, so I'm not going to name them. But Wilson made the call to their project manager or something out there. And they told him, according to Eric Davis's notes, that they couldn't talk to him on the phone. He would have to come out. So he flew out to the West Coast to meet with these people, all about recovered alien technology. They took him into a secure vault, okay, closed the door, you know, kind of like the cone of silence. Do you remember Get Smart, Billy?
Yes.
Yeah, whenever Max would talk to the chief, the cone of silence would come down over them, so nobody could eavesdrop. So he's in this vault, and he asked them point blank, "What's the story?" And allegedly, one of them pulled out a book and said, "These are the people that are authorized to get this type of information. And guess what, Admiral? Your name is not on there." And he said, "But I head up the Defense Intelligence Agency." "We don't care. You don't have a need to know." And according to various accounts, this enraged Wilson. Two-star admiral, okay? The guy that was head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. And here's this goddamn civilian, okay, probably never wore a uniform, never certainly went into harm's way, I'm guessing. This is probably how Wilson saw it. And they're refusing me information. Now, the rumor was that they had recovered tech, that they were attempting to discover how it operated, how it worked, back engineer it, et cetera, ad nauseum. And they basically told him to go pound sand. So he goes back to D.C., and he was, by all accounts, pissed, all right? He goes into the Pentagon, starts making a racket, and somebody is alleged to have pulled him aside and said, "Admiral, let me ask you, do you like those 2 stars on your collar? And are you looking forward to your nice, comfy retirement and going home and being free and so on and so forth?" Well, if I were you, Admiral, I'd let it lay. Now, what is the deal about this alleged aerospace company with alleged recovered technology? It all comes down to this. If, in fact, it were true, and for what it's worth, I think it is true. Okay, I have, as a matter of fact, no doubt in my former military mind it's true. This would be so highly classified. It would be an SAP program, Special Access Program. Now, under the auspices of an SAP program, even acknowledging that the SAP exists is a violation of federal law, federal regulation. You can't even admit that there is such a thing as a special access program, much less if, in fact, it were recovered alien tech. So Wilson would have absolutely no other thing he could do than deny. He would lie because of official federal rules and regulations. And I hope that makes sense to everybody, because that's how it works. Billy, I'm sure you know this.
Yeah. What I think was interesting is when the notes came out, I guess you could call him a friend or a contact in Australia asked, "Well, are you going to do another interview with Admiral Wilson?" Because I had contacted him back in 2008 to discuss Mitchell's version of that story. And he said, no. He said, I remember meeting with Dr. Mitchell because he was a moonwalking astronaut, and I wanted to meet him as an American hero. And I do remember him talking about these special access, I don't know if he used that word, that acronym, SAP, but these special programs that were being hidden regarding research work on UFOs. He said, but no, I never looked into it because I thought it was a waste of time. This is what he said in 2008. So I had looked after the Davis notes were publicized on Richard Dolan. I started trying to find the admiral again, and I didn't have any luck. And I get this contact from Australia. I said, well, here's his number. I said, okay, I'll sure. And when I called him up out of the blue, he was very convivial, and he was kind of like, well, I don't know, I was not the first person to contact him. It was about a week or so after the Davis notes, or the alleged Davis notes, had been publicized. So evidently there were other people who talked to Wilson too, so I knew I was kind of running up against the clock here if I wanted to get a so-called scoop. And he was very convivial, seemed very relaxed. And in a way, because I respect people in command positions just because of the knowledge that they bring to bear. And, I felt like I was really out of my element talking with him because I felt like I didn't even know the right questions to ask. But he seemed to welcome the questions. And, no, I told you the same thing I'm going to tell you, back in 2008. My story hasn't changed. I did not look for this because I just I thought it was a waste of time. So he was very consistent and, like I said, very conversational. And yet, as you say correctly, those notes are extremely detailed. And I agree. I mean, I think that's not from your handwriting, even if you're doing shorthand. Those are not the kind of notes that you get from stenography. That's got to be recorded. So I would imagine that those recordings are out there somewhere. I would hope they are anyway.
You know what it reminds me of, Billy?
Yeah.
You saw Independence Day, the film, the
Sure.
blockbuster film that came out in 1996. Okay?
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, Vicki and I were even a part of that. We were asked to speak out at Rachel, Nevada, okay, when they renamed the highway, the extraterrestrial highway, in honor of this film and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Okay? And I'll never forget in the movie, after the aliens show up, okay, here's the president with the Secretary of Defense and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And basically they said, well, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember exactly how it came up, but Mr. President, actually we have a recovered unidentified flying object. And he's like, what? Oh, yeah, well, we have it out at the site Area 51. What? And you didn't tell me? Okay. Well, that's what it reminds me of. Here, allegedly, a bunch of damn civilians and a mega, probably national corporation has the keys to the kingdom. Okay. They have recovered technology. And the freaking Defense Intelligence Agency head is not authorized to know anything about it. That kind of blows my mind, Billy.
Well, and also going back to what you were saying about the illegality of even mentioning knowledge of a SAP, of course, the ball would be in Davis's court after this. And I tried to reach Eric, and I was unable to even reach him. I think I had some outdated information, but at any rate, If that's true, that you were prohibited from an NDA by an NDA from even talking about an SAP, then certainly that would explain Davis's silence as well. So just because
silence, he's hidden himself.
Well, to a certain extent, but also remember the New York Times ran a piece last summer, I think it was, where he has been doing some testimony behind closed doors to some of those Gang of Eight people, staffers, about the UAP program, and I think it was his words that they had examining material that was not made by human hands, So there obviously there's something going on, but I think before I got ready to talk to you tonight, I went back through some of my old stuff, and I just think the real crime here is shutting out the good minds, the good scientific minds. I mean, I'll give you an example. I guess it was about 10 years ago. I got a phone call from a lawyer over in Titusville, which is on the other side of the state from where I'm at. We're on the West Coast. Titusville's right across the river from the Kennedy Space Center. And he said, Billy, we're representing the estate of a fellow named John Reese, and he's left you some boxes. We don't know what's in those boxes, but do you remember Mr. Reese? I'm thinking, geez, do I remember this guy? And then the guy said something like, well, he had an interest in UFOs. I said, oh, yeah. John Reese, yeah, he was a voice on the phone. He was never anybody I'd actually met. I wish I had, in retrospect. Anyway, he said, there's some boxes for you. If you want to come pick them up, they're all yours. So I did. I drove over, and he had 2 big cardboard boxes of stuff. A lot of it were clippings of the stuff that I had written. But it was much more than that. This guy had worked for NASA for a number of years. He was an electrical engineer, and he had done work on things like Galileo, for instance, extraplanetary vehicles and missions, Viking. And then he left the space agency and went into private contracting, also at the Cape. And I looked at the voluminous material in here, lots of technical papers. He had even been with, I think it was NICAP, up in Ohio. He had even a series of Polaroids, black and whites, from the 1950s, I think it was, showing this disc that was, one it's vertical and another one it's horizontal. I mean, just different, over what appeared to be a winter landscape of skeletal deciduous trees in the background. But anyway, this guy took this stuff seriously. He also had a little metal card catalog of UFOs that presented electromagnetic effects. He had time, date, location, and exactly what happened. And this was jammed. I mean, I can't imagine the kind of research, again, we're talking pre-internet, that went into this, him being an electrical engineer, of course. What he was trying to do was, so far as I could tell, was establishing patterns. Are there meteorological patterns to this, a time of year, or is it related to some event? In fact, there were 2 boxes of these card file notes. Each card was a separate event with varying degrees of detail in each one. And the second box was not, maybe half full, I guess, compared with the one that was just packed. You couldn't even stick a pen between the cards. They were that densely packed. And anyway, so apparently he ran out of gas in 1973. That's when the last entry was. And I talked to his surviving niece. He lived by himself in a little apartment in Titusville, and the neighbors began to think something was up when they started noticing the newspapers stacking up in front of his doorway there. And then so the people went in and they found him. He had passed away. He was on his bed. I think he was 74 years old. So he died alone. And I just think that is kind of an embodiment of a larger tragedy, or I might even call it a crime. People with that kind of expertise, that kind of curiosity, that kind of dedication, that kind of discipline to collect this sort of data. And again, a lot of it was technical. I mean, he was taking stuff, early government stuff, that was in the public domain. It wasn't like it was classified material, but it was material, open source, that he was working with. And like most of us will, maybe probably all of us, will all die without knowing what's at the heart of this mystery. But if you go back to 1969 when they shuttered Project Blue Book, Don, I'm not sure we're any closer to what is going on today than we were back then. We're certainly getting a lot more publicity. But I think about the time, half a century wasted, incredible minds, curious people who want to be a part of this, like John Reese. I'm going, what are we thinking by compartmentalizing this stuff? Are we that pathological?
Well, there's only one reason to do that, and of course, this reason has been overused and, in my opinion, and abused. But there is someone or some group that consider this to be of grave national importance, involving national security. And look, it's not only the United States that looks at this. It's the Russian Confederation. It's the Chinese Communist. It's the governments of Great Britain, of France, of Germany, etc. All these nations, and God forbid that I forget the Japanese or the Australians, but all of these nations realize that there is something going on here, and has been for a very long time. Now, Billy, I wanted to say this. Since I became actively involved in this in the late 80s, the people that I have talked to, butted heads with over the years include NASA, the Pentagon, the professional skeptics or debunker class, okay, for years and years.
Oh, sure.
And I was of the opinion it would never, ever change. But it did. It did, going on a little over 3 years ago. When Harry Reid held his press conference and admitted securing, well, you and I know it's chump change, but over $20 million for a Pentagon program to investigate the ATIP program, to investigate potential aerial threats. That was a shocker to me. And on the heels of that, the U.S. Navy comes forward with their reports about what had happened to their Nimitz battle group during training and maneuvers, encountering what they termed these objects that they called Tic Tacs. And then we hear about what is happening off the East Coast, the same type of thing. And then on television, on the History Channel, for a couple of seasons, there was a program called Unidentified. Now, one of the people on that program was a former Undersecretary of State for Intelligence, Chris Mellon. Okay. You talk about somebody that's coming from rarefied atmospheres. And, somebody else from the Pentagon, Lou Elizondo, and I've had some conversations with Elizondo, And I asked him point blank. I said, Lou, here's my question. I said, I've watched every episode of Unidentified. I've studied them extensively. I said, I put on my detective hat when I did that. And I said, you know what? I've come to the conclusion every episode of that program, you guys emphasized a potential threat. Yeah, we did. And I said, well, let me ask you. Now, looking at this, and I used my criminal investigator persona. I said, looking at this, I came to one of two conclusions. Okay. Number one, either you guys are aware of something heading down the road toward us that is going to be, for all intents and purposes, impossible to deny when it arrives. Okay. And this, in fact, is what you're doing is a kind of a soft disclosure. Or number two, and I was involved in intelligence, in the military, in Vietnam. And I said, this is the biggest dog and pony show disinformation scheme I've ever encountered. Which is it? And I got to dance. So I got to dance. Okay. That's what. So, Billy, to me.
Where do you come down on it though, Don?
Where do I come down on it?
Yeah. I mean, do you think what do you think Unidentified was all about?
If push came to shove, okay, I would have to say that someone or some ones, plural, gave this the green light to go ahead. Because, and I'm talking about from way up above, all right? I think there's been enough information that has come out and enough cases. I mean, hey, look, Billy, you and I have been involved in this for decades, all right? I've seen so many cases. I've heard so many stories just like you. And, I've got to, and I don't mean to be crude, but I've refined my bullshit filter to a high degree. All right. And when I see something like this, I have a sneaking suspicion that somebody somewhere is trying to tell the public at large something. Now, let's face it. Most people do not think about this every day like you or I might, or others involved in the research arena might. But most people, oh, that's an interesting story, and then, continue on with their lives. But there is a reality here. And I mean, there are so many aspects to this that we wouldn't, if you and I were to stay on the air for a month, okay, we couldn't cover it all. But there's so many aspects. For example, the Skinwalker Ranch. I think that figures into this. And many other things, abductions, the beat that I was on early on in my career with human mutilations, much like cattle mutilations. So I think that there is definitely something here. Now, the question to my mind is, where is it going to lead? And perhaps we'll get a better idea at the end of June when all that paperwork and documents are to be released. You know that Marco Rubio has been behind. We'll see where that ends up. I have a feeling we're going to be buried under an avalanche of a lot of crap, along with any nuggets that might be in there. But there
seems to be some debate over whether or not they're going to be able to make that June deadline now, whether they can get their stuff together at this point. But if I could just circle back to Unidentified for just a second with you, Don. Are you taking issue with the idea that they were concentrating on the threat angle of this thing?
No, I found it very interesting that they kept that drumbeat beating every week of a potential threat. Okay, look, here's my bottom line. I'm gonna metaphorically, I'm going to undress a little bit here. I don't often talk about my personal beliefs, but if I had to go to court and they ask me for my speculation, I would speculate that we in fact have a space force. I think we have some vehicles up there flying that I don't know what capabilities they have, but I think we have some advanced avionics up there that would blow our minds if we knew about it. I think that they have been keeping an eye on those coming and those going, and I think that there's no doubt that there are those that have been coming by for a long time and leaving. I think that those unknown visitors have representatives right down here on the ground, okay, doing God only knows.
Whoa, okay, go into that. You can't just put it out there. What do you mean, unknown representatives? Talk about that.
I think there are extraterrestrials that are very human-like, that would pass unnoticed on the street, that are down here. And I have my reasons for saying that. I mean, on the surface, that sounds pretty wazoo, and I'll be the first to admit it. But, yeah, I think that there are those who walk among us unknown to the rest of us.
What led you to speculate in that direction?
Oh, a number of things, not the least of which was the remote viewing program, the Stargate program. I knew and was friends with Ingo Swann.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And Swann and I had a very memorable 4 or 5 hour dinner out here at a little Italian restaurant in Burbank. My wife and I and Ingo and another person were there, and we talked about his book, Penetration, to a great extent. He queried me extensively on my transient lunar phenomena research. As a matter of fact, that's how I met him. I had been invited to give an address back in Bordentown, New Jersey. I believe the guy that had me come back, Pat Marcatilio. Did you know Pat?
It did not. No.
Well, he invited me to come back, and I gave a talk about that. A lot of people were there. I had some photographs that I had secured over the years, and at any rate, I was convinced, and still am, that there was and is a presence on our own moon, have been for a very long time. And anyway, Ingo Swann came down from New York City to hear my address. And we became affiliated, associated. He liked what I had to say. And when he was coming out here to visit family, well, this had to be 15, not quite 20 years ago, he got in touch, and we arranged this dinner. And we talked about a lot of things. And one of the things we talked about was his rather extraordinary rendition of what happened to him through unknown, apparently, intelligence people that had secured him to do a job for them, which included a clandestine remote viewing operation on the moon. And he encountered some individuals, I guess is the best way to put it, in a market out here in, I forget now exactly where it was. It was down on the coast. And as he walked up, he noticed two of those intelligence operatives that he had seen before having a woman, and the way Ingo Swann described her, she was beyond gorgeous and alluring, and the way she was dressed. And as he walked up to her, his sight talent started to ring off the bell. And then he noticed these two alleged operatives, and it scared him so bad he got the hell out of there. And later he had a call from his intelligence connection that told him, if you ever see that individual, that woman again, stay away from her. She's more dangerous than you could ever imagine.
Okay, all right.
So,
much more cloak and dagger than that.
Well, no, but then they took him, according to what's in his book, Penetration. And incidentally, if you have never read that book, I highly recommend it. It's almost impossible to find a hardback or a soft cover of it, but it is available on the internet. If you put in Penetration author Ingo Swann, it'll take you to a place where you can download a PDF of it.
Okay.
And it's worth reading. Let me tell you this. But at any rate, yeah, these guys even took him up to a wilderness area in Alaska where they took him to observe an unidentified object, a UFO, a UAP, come down and apparently suck up water from a lake. And some rather pyrotechnic things happened, according to what he had to say. So, it's stuff like that. And like I said, I knew Swann, and I was joking with him. And I said, well, Ingo, if it took psychic talent to get out of this restaurant, I couldn't get out of my chair. And he suddenly got a very funny look on his face, and he stared at me for a moment.
Whoa.
And then he said, yeah, sure. So,
so did your interaction with Ingo Swann lead you to believe that there may be, for lack of a better word, aliens walking among us?
Oh, not just him. There were several other things in my time here that that convinced me that was very possible, even probable. But so I didn't mean to get sidetracked there.
No, that's okay. But I one of the things, I go back to your missing time back in '68. Did you ever do a hypnotic regression with that?
Yeah, Hopkins.
And anything you can talk about?
I hit a block, to be honest. I hit a block. And, Hopkins, and it was only ever a one-time thing. I mean, I never tried again. But I did agree.
Was that disappointing to you, that you hit a block?
No.
Okay.
No, it wasn't. It actually wasn't. I like to think of myself as immune, Billy. And, something like...
That's interesting. Okay, what do you mean by that?
Bulletproof.
In terms of?
The phenomena.
You mean it cannot interact with you?
No, it can't reach me on a visceral level.
Okay, that's interesting.
But at any rate...
Wait, I'm sorry, I don't want to... This is your show, but I'm just really curious why you would make that statement. I just want to understand.
Well, it's kind of like when I was in the Army or when I was a detective. You know, I like to stand off and examine the action as opposed to necessarily, of course I did, but necessarily jumping into the middle of it. And this has always been, I'm not sure of the right adjective to use, but you know, I've always tried to keep myself in a position where I could control the circumstances.
Gotcha. I get that.
But at any rate, with all of this happening now, the apparent disclosure, the fact that the Navy allowed their pilots to talk about these unknown encounters, the fact that gun camera footage was approved by somebody at the Pentagon to enter the public domain, and all of these other things. You know what I find most astounding, Billy?
Tell me.
The very guys that have been in the shadows for 70 years with this, the United States Air Force, and they have yet to make one public statement about any of this. And you know that there have to be people in the upper echelon of the Air Force that are unhappy campers with what the Navy has done.
Pretty conspicuous silence from the Air Force, isn't it? I mean, they're the ones who are charged with policing the high ground. And,
exactly.
You know, our high ground is Swiss cheese when it comes to security. That's not necessarily the Navy's job, you know. I mean, and that's the thing that really I think the larger conversation, and I don't know if I've got the right analogy here, but I keep going back to where we were in 1945, 1946, when we have sole possession of nuclear weapons. And there was a big debate in the United States and, of course, the world about what do we do with this technology. Do we share it with the express purpose of making sure nobody ever acquires this technology? We police it. Or do we hoard this information to ourselves because we know better for what, you know, what's best for the rest of the world? And, of course, by hoarding it, we couldn't stop the proliferation. And I don't know if that's the right analogy for what we're dealing with right now, but the technology that we're confronting, the apparent technology, is obviously many orders of magnitude above the nuclear stuff. And yet, whoever controls it, one would think, has the destiny of shaping Earth's future in their hands. And, you know, I know there's a debate about, you know, sovereignty and autonomy and all of this kind of stuff when it comes to national security. But honestly, I don't know if any one nation can crack this nut, assuming this nut can be cracked, all by themselves. You know, where do you stand on that? Do you think it's going to take a multinational effort, or?
Well, I kind of look at it like this. Would you want, because these are the current bad guys, would you want Iran to have this technology? Or would you want North Korea to have this technology, or China, or Russia before we do? Okay? And that's got to be at the forefront of any, you know, highly placed official that are dealing with this subject here in the United States.
It certainly does. And the reason I even bring this up was just before the COVID thing hit last year, we have these series of winter lectures here in Sarasota. And one of the folks who appeared here locally was an Admiral Gary Roughhead. He was the chief of naval operations in the double aughts. I forget what year, but basically it was, you know, Pacific, Atlantic, I mean the entire theater of naval operations. And his speech was about China. and their territorial ambitions, and about, the technology that China is going to be developing, and looking at chokeheads, like Suez Canal, for instance. And
which incidentally are choked up right now.
Oh, I know. Can you believe that? How crazy. He didn't take a terrorist. It just took incompetence and some wind, I guess. I heard there was wind involved. Can you believe that? Yeah, next thing you know, we're going to have $3 gas. Well, is it $3 over there in California?
Hell, it's pushing $5.
Oh, geez. Well, we're about to hit $3 a gallon over here, which I get. But anyway, a very holistic, strategic approach to how we deal with China. And I pulled him aside after his presentation and was asking about, the FLIR videos with, and the F-18s and all that. And I said, so he didn't appear all that comfortable talking about it, but he said, yeah, I've seen these videos, and, we don't know what they are. And he says, I can tell you that there have been a few other incidents, too. I don't know much about them, but we've had some come out of the water, and that kind of got my attention, And so the question that I had, we were talking about strategic assets and about what you could do if you could park a transmedium vehicle, let's say, on the bottom of the ocean, and you could put it in sleep mode until whenever you need to activate it. He's trying to say, imagine what that could do. I think the closest they've got right now is something called a flimmer. It's this clumsy-looking drone that can fly and then go under the water, but it's, leaves all kinds of signatures. And I said, so what about this, this larger conundrum that we're up against, this UFO stuff? And I was asking specifically about China. And and he said, I don't think one country can do this by itself. And he says, certainly we would have to protect our secrets, et cetera, et cetera. He said, but I would look at this as an opportunity to build a bridge. He said, you don't want to give the farm away, but in terms of getting collaboration, cooperation, where the interests are in fact mutual, he said, I would see this as an opportunity. And I went, wow, that's interesting. And to really get to the bottom, can every nation afford a Manhattan Project? I don't think so. I don't think we can afford another Manhattan Project. So I don't know. I just think that because we are all confronted by this hyper technology, if in fact that's what we're looking at, I do see, and here I am, I know nothing about international politics or diplomacy or anything. I'm just talking off the top of my head, but it's just some Joe Schmo. I'm thinking, surely this could be, assuming you set the parameters, this could be a venue where we could find common ground. Or at least maybe I'm just naive enough to want to believe that, But anyway, I don't think any one nation is going to get to the bottom of it, assuming you can get to assuming it's possible to get to the bottom of it. I don't think
almost 30 years ago, after the Iron Curtain collapsed, Russia suddenly opened up like no one would have ever believed possible. Okay. I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and, I went to war in Vietnam, and I fought against Russian, Soviet rifles and artillery, and all that stuff. Okay. And, its origins came from then the Soviet Union. And I fully expected, and probably much like my father did at the end of World War II, that sooner or later, God forbid, we're going to be in a war with the Russians. Well, we never were. We were proxy wars, of course, but never an absolute armed confrontation, which, thank God, because who knows where that would have gone. But Suddenly, here are these secrets from the KGB up for sale. Here are all the Russian technology flowing into the United States, by the metric ton. It was unbelievable. And then former high-level Soviet officials start coming over here. Now, I met and spent a weekend interviewing Dr. Marina Popovich. Now, she was called the Russian Chuck Yeager. And everybody knows who Chuck Yeager was, right? He was the guy that broke the first human being to break the speed barrier. She was an aviator. She was a retired Red Air Force colonel. Her husband, ex-husband, I might add, and she told me all about that, was General Pavel Popovich, who was the first human being to rendezvous with another spacecraft in orbit back in 61 or 62. Okay, remember back in those days, the Russians were far in advance of us in outer space things. And she freely talked to me about UFO encounters in the former Soviet Union. As a matter of fact, that's where I got the photograph from her when she came back to the States later that year of the Soviet Phobos 2 probe that photographed a huge, unbelievably long, huge UFO in Mars orbit.
And now we're coming full circle to the Mars Observer, which is what you wanted to get to earlier.
Well,
right?
I did. Yes, I did. And the Mars Observer thing was something that we followed up. I mean, I recall at that time, the big thing was the face on Mars in Cydonia. And there were people, among them Richard Hoagland, Professor Stan McDaniel, that were going hammer and tongue to get the NASA people to even put a camera on their probe.
Exactly.
To go to Mars to photograph the damn thing. And they finally succeeded. For whatever reason, NASA acquiesced. And then Hurricane Andrew blew in. Now, I'm sure you remember that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I went down to Miami-Dade after that. It was incredible.
Well, here was the thing. So now, like I said, I've got by nature, Billy, I'm skeptical, and I can be very cynical. And I guess it comes from when I was a cop. I can be suspicious. And they pulled that capsule off because it couldn't launch during Andrew. They took it back to a clean room to find out, was it damaged? They popped the lid on it. They go in, they look, and the container held what appeared to be floor sweepings that somebody had broomed up, put it in a can, and dumped the whole damn thing into the space capsule.
How is that possible?
And that's not all. But wait, there's more. The camera that they had installed in there, somebody had smeared grease all over the lens of the camera.
Don, this is stunning. This is all news to me.
You didn't know about that?
No, and I was in the backyard of all that stuff. Wow.
Well, let me tell you what. We called up NASA to find out, because we heard about this we had means and sources, and called them up. Oh, yep, we're gonna do an investigation on this, but we don't know what happened, but yeah, we're gonna check that out. Well, Billy, that was the end of the story. Okay? Nobody ever came forward to say how that happened. Now, this thing had been hooked up to nitrogen lines to keep everything inside pristine. So This was cut and dried sabotage. somebody sabotaged that damn thing. Well, they got it all cleaned up, and we're almost out of time, but let me just conclude the story. So this thing launches. It finally gets to Mars 3 days out. For some inexplicable reason, some knucklehead at NASA decided to reboot everything. They turned everything off, and when they turned everything back on, no spacecraft.
I knew it was lost in space, but that stuff about the smeared camera lens, that was news to me.
Well, check it out, my friend.
I missed that story. That's incredible.
Check it out. Check it out. Oh yeah. I'll tell you, we bounced a lot of stories at UFO Magazine, and that's always been one that bothered me greatly, Billy.
Hey, Don, if you were doing UFO Magazine again today, what would you be focusing on? What would be your priority?
This Harry Reid story. Now, Reid is physically, well, he's in bad shape. Okay, he's fighting cancer. He's in bad shape. And last time I saw an interview with him, he was in a wheelchair. But if possible, I would want to try to get to him, to talk to him. I would want to talk to Marco Rubio, if possible. Of course, he's a real important guy, and I'm not, so who knows?
What would you ask?
Well, the first thing I would ask is, how much have you interfaced with the armed forces, primarily the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force? I'd want to know exactly what those guys were sitting on, because you and I know they're sitting on a hell of a lot. And then I would go to the Secretary at the Navy, and I would want to talk to them. Now, of course, we're in a new administration, and there have already been some major foul-ups with this administration, i.e. the border crisis again, and other things. China is getting pretty pushy. I think they see this current administration is not nearly as tough as the last one. But I would want to know exactly what the hell was happening, what was coming up with this UAP business, because let me tell you what, I got a feeling it's not all said and done. Billy, we are out of time, my friend. Look, I want to thank you profusely for coming back on. I would love to have you again back on before long. I think we've had a hell of a conversation, and I, quite frankly, would like to pursue it further.
Well, I want to wish you and Vicki the best of luck with your kitchen remodeling. That's going to be a challenge. So I hope your stress levels remain low, Don. Try to remember this isn't the end of the world, okay?
Yes, sir. Hey, and that's it for this week, ladies and gentlemen. Next week will be a best of because of the holiday coming up. In the meantime, keep your eyes pointed up, your ear to the ground, and have a fantastic weekend. Till next time, good night.